Welcome to The Intentional Exit, a leadership legacy podcast for those who don't just want to retire, but want to do it well. I'm Rebecca Schriver, and this is where we help you protect what you've built, reduce unnecessary taxes, and create a plan that gives you clarity, confidence, and control. So together, we make sure your exit is not accidental, it's intentional. Before we begin, please note that the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as tax, legal, or financial advice. For guidance specific to your situation, we recommend consulting with a qualified professional.
The retirement industry has spent decades getting people to ask the exact wrong question. Did I build my bucket big enough? Everybody is focused on the number. How much money do I have? Very few people ask which one of us is going to financially destroy the other one first. And that's exactly what it looks like whenever we become the surviving spouse. You become the victim of planning that was lacking in understanding that one of you is actually going to have to carry the ball to the finish line. This is The Intentional Exit, episode 11, and we're going to explore the cost of being the surviving spouse. We know I have spent years sitting across from people at their kitchen tables having lots of discussions around these different retirement strategies. We talk about long-term care. We talk about income. We talk about expenses. We talk about taxes. We even discuss what happens when one spouse dies. And what we know is that the death of a spouse is not a rare event. It will happen to almost everybody who is married. One of you will pass away and the other one will be left to carry the ball. Yet almost no one plans for it. We don't talk about it enough. We know that this is a big, short-sighted moment in the world of retirement. But on The Intentional Exit, we're different. We refuse to stick our head in the sand. We refuse to act like this isn't going to happen. We face these things head on so that the people that we love and that we care about can be passed the keys in an intentional way, so that you are taking the keys from being in control as a couple to being in control as an individual. Some of the key ingredients here are that we remove the taxes in the most efficient way possible, because at the very basic level, like if you know nothing else about tax brackets, I'm going to teach you one thing today, okay? And that one thing is, when you go from married filing jointly to an individual, you actually reduce almost exactly in half how much money you can have in income each year before you hit the speed bumps, right? So every time you hit a speed bump, you bump up another tax bracket, meaning we go from currently 12 to 22% to 24% to 32% to 35%. And each stack of money, right, as we add it on, bumps higher and higher. But the amount of money that you can earn or that you can have come in each year gets cut in half as far as those particular tax brackets are concerned. So where you could earn roughly $87,000, 89, I think, believe this year, at the 12% tax bracket, we are then going to cut it in half at around the 44.5 mark to say, well, you can only earn $44,500. Then if we have our married filing jointly, right? If we're married filing jointly and we're experiencing this thing called RMDs, or the required minimum distributions, we're pulling it out and it's fitting into our tall tax ceilings. And even though I am a huge proponent of divorcing the IRS from your retirement dollars, if you haven't done so and then somebody dies, which is gonna happen 99% of the time, You just volunteered additional taxes to the IRS simply because we changed our tax status from married filing jointly down to an individual level, right? And so a lot of times when people are talking about tax bracket control and how do we shift dollars and all of these things and what are taxes in retirement, they focus on two things, two only. The first being, what does it look like as it is, right? Or status quo, meaning married filing jointly. And what does it look like when we both die and it goes to our kids? But we forgot about each other, right? Because it may be your spouse that's having to deal with it, or it may be you. There's never a guarantee as to which spouse is going to pass away first, right? We don't know who's going to pass away first. And so really, if you're looking at it, we almost need 3 plans. Or maybe we don't. Maybe if you do it the right way from the beginning, you don't have to have 3 plans because you already kicked the IRS out of your back pocket. You know, we walk around with our wallets and our purses. And if we were out in public and somebody came up and they were constantly touching your wallet in your back pocket or your front pocket if you're listening to your chiropractor, right? But if they're constantly coming up and they're touching your wallet, or they're constantly coming up and sticking their hand down in your purse, eventually you're going to do something about it. You're going to turn around and you're going to tell them to leave you alone, get away from me. We don't want you touching our wallet, right? And we definitely don't want you that close to us. But isn't that the IRS, right? Every time we earn $1, they touch our wallet and they take a piece out. Every time we save a tax deferred dollar, we are letting them hold on to our wallet with both hands, right? They're holding onto our wallet with both hands. And anytime you want to take money out, they rip away their portion. And you allowed them to do it. But in the intentional exit, we are done. We are finished with sleepwalking into retirement. We are not going to stick our head in the sand. We are not going to allow the IRS or anyone else to drive our car. We're not going to hand them the keys. We are taking back the keys of our retirement. We are protecting our families. We are protecting our spouse. We are putting up the line and saying, you don't get to cross it. Yes, I agree. I made the decision way back when I didn't know better, to partner with the IRS in my retirement. Right? I made the agreement that I would save $1 today, and then I would reduce my income, and then I would pay less taxes in that year for the agreement that we would pay the taxes later. We procrastinated, right? We procrastinated on the taxes, thinking that that somehow benefited us in the future. But what we didn't realize is that it wasn't actually reduced in the future, right? It's not reduced in the future. It's just that we are paying them later. And then when one person passes away because of the Secure Act, right, we went from, okay, it's an inherited IRA to it's a spousal. And now with the spousal IRA, what happens is if you're married, let's say you each have a 401k or an IRA, right? And you've both hit the age of hitting RMDs. So you're in your 70s. You know, we know the average age of Americans when they pass away is closer to their upper 70s or 80s at this point. But we've hit this age of RMDs, which is the required minimum distribution. And these dollars are coming out to us. And they're fitting inside of, if you've done nothing, right? And if you're just following the government program, they're fitting inside your married filing jointly tax status. But if one person passes away and we have roughly the same number of dollars inside of these retirement accounts, We just exponentially increased the amount of taxes that are going to be paid on those dollars. And a lot of times women live way longer than men, right? So we've done it for the long haul. We're going to do it for a decade, possibly two, right? And that required minimum distribution that comes out didn't get reduced, but the taxes sure did. They went up, right? So the amount of money that came out didn't get reduced, but the taxes on it sure went up, right? Now we're bumping into higher and higher tax brackets. Our IRMA costs, right? So those Medicare costs and what we can earn and not have to pay a penalty drastically reduced. They came down in half, which means we almost positively, without a whole lot of question, made our Medicare more expensive, right? So taxes became more expensive, Medicare became more expensive, and by the way, we cut our Social Security possibly in half. If not, we at least reduced it down by a third, because if your spouse never worked, right, and they stayed at home and you worked, they get half of your Social Security retirement. And I realize that's not a perfect number. It's not. I'm not saying that it is. But at minimum, right, we reduced our Social Security income by a third, and we exponentially increased the amount of taxes and the amount of penalties that that person is going to pay. And then we have this misnomer, we have this idea, right? It's not logical, but it's kind of that linear math that we learned when we were in first grade or even kindergarten, if we're being honest, which is 1 + 1 = 2. So therefore 2 - 1 = 1. So if one person passes away and the other person is still living, we must have cut our cost in half. Not the case, right? If you still have a mortgage, your mortgage didn't go down just because one spouse passed away. If you have electricity, you still have all of the same service charges along with the kilowatt hours that you're paying for. Same thing for the water and sewer. Same thing for the trash service. Same thing for the property taxes, right? So when we're looking at this, it doesn't then all of the sudden become monumentally less expensive to live because you're one person instead of two. It actually becomes exponentially more expensive because you're paying like there are two people there, but you're also increasing the amount of taxes, increasing the amount of penalties, and you're trying to survive on actually less money. Right? And so when we look at this, we have to be highly aware of how this actually functions, because if we don't pay attention, right, and we sleepwalk into retirement and we don't take these things into consideration, we can be harming our spouse, the person we've spent our life with, the person that we have raised our children with, the person that we built the life with. We could be putting them in the worst position possible. You could be putting yourself into the worst position possible, and we could be compounding the grief, right? We could be compounding it because, hey, not only did you leave me, right? You died on me. How dare you, right? And we know it's going to happen, but you also left me with the bill. And you have no idea how many times I have sat down across from somebody who lost their spouse, who is grieving, who is trying to figure all of this out. And then they realize how much more expensive it's going to be. And all of the sudden, all of the plans, all of the things that they had done, not only are they not getting to do it with their spouse, but they're not able to do it either because nobody accounted for the fact that eventually one of you would possibly die first. we've got to do better, right? And the key to doing better is knowledge, right? Knowledge is power. This is why we've created the Surviving Spouse Efficiency Tool. It lives on leadershiplegacypro.com website. You can go there and fill out your information to find out what happens to my spouse if I die. What happens to me if my spouse dies? Because I got to be really honest with you. We've talked for weeks about retirement efficiency. We've talked about taxes. We've talked about exposure to long-term care risks. We've exposed you to a tremendous amount of information. But if you do nothing, right? If you bury your head in the sand, we're not going to get there. And on the intentional exit, we don't bury our head in the sand. We face these problems head on. And when we do that, we hand you and your spouse back the keys. You get to drive your own car, because I got news for you. If we get rid of the IRS in your retirement, we get rid of it for both of you, right? Then it's not as big of a question of who dies first and how are we going to survive that. It's a question of, I can spend my time grieving the loss of the person. I can spend my time grieving the loss of the life that we were going to live, but I don't have to do it at the same time I'm scrambling to figure all of these things out. More often than not, whenever someone is going through this experience, if nothing has been done and they're busy trying to figure all of these things out, it is not the most responsible person. It's not the most responsible child who actually helps to guide the parent. It's the one that's the loudest, right? And the one that's the loudest isn't always the one with the most know-how. Isn't always the one with the most compassion, isn't always the one who is thinking about their parent first. And unfortunately, if you do nothing about it, you are subjecting yourself or your spouse to this dynamic that's not healthy for anyone, right? It's not healthy to get into this situation where you are not only grieving, but you're under extreme pressure. And guys, I'm going to tell you right now, 9 times out of 10, it's the men that hold the keys to the finances. It is also the men who die first. We know statistically the man goes first. I have sat down with far too many widows, far too many, who don't even know where the checkbook is, right? They have no idea who they pay for the electric bill. They have no idea where they send the water bill. They have no idea where they pay the mortgage. They have no idea where their accounts are. They have no idea the investment strategies. They have no idea what the structure looks like that's been supporting their lifestyle. And so then they become very, very afraid of themselves. They have no idea how to handle it. I have more men look at me and go, promise me, whenever I pass away, you're going to help her. Promise me that the day that comes, you're not going to abandon her. You're going to help her make educated decisions, because we spent a tremendous amount of time putting this all into play. And what I'm here to tell you is that the people who create the least amount of variables, the one who pull away as many variables as we can control, whether that's long-term care planning, tax planning, income planning, right? We want to plan that income not for one person, but for 2 people and then 1 person, right? And that's a different skill set. You have spent decades figuring out how to grow your bucket and almost 0 time figuring out how to manage the distribution as a married couple, let alone as a single individual. We cannot continue down this path. We cannot expect to use an accumulation mindset with zero regard for taxes, with zero regard for the risks that come along, with zero knowledge and with zero transfer of that knowledge to our spouse, and think that we're going to be successful. It simply doesn't work. The people who follow the intentional exit, they're different, right? We're not burying our heads in the sand. We are facing our problems head on. We are having the difficult conversations early. We're doing something about it, right? We're taking back our keys. We are driving our own car. We are making sure that we are protecting our loved ones. We are making sure to put them in the best position possible. You know what's fascinating? The moment someone dies, Social Security shrinks, pensions shrink, taxes go up, Medicare costs go up, and we think we'll just figure it out at the time that it happens, right? So a lot of financial advisors will say, when we get there, we'll deal with it. That's the wrong attitude. I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but that is the wrong attitude. That is how we basically ensure that our loved one is going to end up in the worst possible situation. And we're not going to do that, right? We've made the decision, right? Just by being here, you've made the decision to look at things differently. You've made the decision to become tax efficient. You've made the decision to take back your keys, right? We want the intentional exit, not the sleepwalk exit, because if you stick to the IRS's plan, and you don't take back the control, you are leaving variables that may cost your family in a significant manner. On the intentional exit, we look at what's coming. We talk about it. We deal with the hard and we walk ourselves forward. And then that way you make my job so much easier, right? Because my job then gets to be, instead of, well, we'll have to see what we can do. Yeah, we're kind of in a pinch. How is that going to feel? And let me see what I can do. To, we planned for this. We put these things in place. Hey, by the way, when we got rid of the IRS for both, we got rid of the IRS for you too. Here's where your income's going to come from. These are the bills. This is how you are organized. And by the way, your loved one did it for you, right? They did it for themselves because nobody knows who's going to pass away first, but they really did it for you. Go to our website, look at the surviving spouse tool, plug in your numbers, right? That is the first step. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. And here's the deal. When you go to the doctor, right? What do they have you do before you get there? You do blood work. You might do, an x-ray, and then you go in and they diagnose whether or not you have a problem, right? You may not have a problem. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you've got it all figured out, but wouldn't it be worth it to at least go look? Wouldn't it be worth it to go and find out whether or not you've got a problem, right? And so if you do this and if you take the time, you can take the next step in getting control of your intentional exit and how your spouse is going to carry on when your intentional exit comes, right? I'm Rebecca Schriver. I would like you to remember that this is not to be used as legal, tax, or financial advice. We are here to help you walk through these hard conversations and take back the keys to your life. Take back the keys to your financial freedom. Take back the keys to your spouse's financial freedom. We thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.